So welcome to Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have two former guests. I have Les Correa, who's the Global Head of Application Security at the Estee Lauder Companies. Welcome back, Les.
Hi.
And I have Krishna Narayan Swamy, who is the CTO and founder at Netscope. Welcome back, Krishna.
Yep, thanks, Sachin.
So Krishna, let's start with you. The topic for today is a single cloud approach, a single cloud public approach, the best approach for the majority of organizations today. So I know, given Netscope's pivotal role since probably the advent of public cloud, we've already seen a trend. So what are you seeing right now in terms of what customers customers who are in a single cloud, are they happy with it? And of customers who are actually migrating from private hosted data center to public cloud, are they thinking of a single cloud or they think of multi-cloud? Why?
So generally, from our vantage point, we do see the transition. Most of the companies are cloud first, and they are trying to, any new applications, they're moving to the public cloud, as well as lifting and shifting existing applications, modernizing them as they move to the public cloud. Depending again on the applications and the needs of the applications, one particular public cloud may be preferable. But in reality, what we see is almost most of our customers at least have two public clouds. Very rarely we see only one. And that's where you start running into other challenges in terms of, now we have two different public clouds. Each one has its own sets of security controls and so on, and visibility controls. How do you then bring them together? And that's where solutions like Netscope help in providing that single pane of glass. But generally, at least most places we see at least two of the three, rarely all three, but we have seen sometimes all three as well.
So Les, again, given your role and where you, how have you seen this evolve, not just within your organization, but across the larger community of CISOs that you talk to, in terms of early adopters? Where is their thinking right now in terms of, okay, do we have all our eggs in a single basket? Do we need to diversify? And back to Krishna's point, is there a cost benefit to diversification, and or is there something else you need to keep in mind of not losing visibility even if you're on a single cloud?
Okay, actually, this is a loaded question, but I'll try to be as short as. Look, business continuity is really important in general for any big company, big or small in general, right? So it's always easier to work with one vendor, and there are many reasons for that. And some of it is financials and licensing and the benefits you get with it, and it's also the learning and the skill sets where you use one kind of provider. Some of the things that Krishna, for example, mentioned is areas such as cloud providers keep changing configurations to improvise and get better, and so on and so forth. So one has to stay on top of these configurations and so on and so forth. But it's not always possible. In fact, most companies have more than, you mentioned three, Krishna. It's actually more than that. Like in our case, we go right across the border, across the world. So you have, in China, you'll have Alibaba Cloud, and you have GCP, AWS, and Azure. So I think in general, there's always more than one cloud anyway. I think there should be a more thought process put into it, because it's a shared kind of responsibility model. There should be more scrutiny on how we get about doing things and making our crown jewels available for improving continuity by itself. And also, sometimes you have no choice, right? Because if mergers and acquisitions, you might get a company that's already using a certain type of cloud. It could be even private cloud, right? So, and so on and so forth. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, we'll dig a little bit deeper. So Krishna, again, coming back to what we were talking about earlier before hitting record, which is, if I have a data center, right, I'm worried about everything from power and cooling to uptime to network cabling and all of that. Now suddenly it's somebody else's problem, right? So sometimes even the stress level of needing to see everything is up and running and all that, and the expertise kind of goes away. So the question is, as you kind of outsource this, what have you seen in terms of customers, again, back to what Les was saying, asking the right questions and seeing if there's been upgrade of default configurations, how does it affect me, and so on and so forth. So have you seen customers still stay on top even though they don't actually own anything?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, this becomes very critical part of their extension of the infrastructure, right? So definitely they are worried about changes, availability of the cloud. To some extent, they try to offload that to like solutions so that they can automate it. So things like, hey, how do I keep track of configuration changes? And so behind the scenes, most of the cloud vendors that we have, the cloud providers, infrastructure providers, have rich APIs, right? That allows for automation. So you turn the burden off onto solutions that can leverage those APIs. Obviously, rarely there are some people who have the resources to do it in-house, but in terms of the monitoring these configuration changes and things going on in the public cloud. But more and more of the organizations, we see them using tools that can help bridge that gap, right, where the changes are happening, but then there's somebody else who's keeping track of that and providing the right set of controls so that they can be rest assured that that whatever is happening in that public cloud or private cloud, wherever the resources are, is conforming to the compliance and other requirements that they have.
Good. So Les, again, we mentioned the shared responsibility model, right? And again, going back to understanding where the division of responsibilities lies, but also as you get more embedded in the cloud, you might have started with, I don't know, SaaS application, but now you're using PaaS and IaaS. So it does get, you have to allocate time, you have to allocate awareness across the organization as they consume these clouds. So how does the CISO's role start to now take on a much broader meaning as the cloud adoption starts to increase?
It's I think, and in fact, even in our environment, there are actually, the good thing is within our environment, right, our senior leadership, and including in our CISO space, has, in fact, it's going across. It's raising that awareness to the level that, you know, you look at details of contracts, you look at details of how exactly this happens, because there's an assumption. It's always easier to say, oh, you know, it's probably because it's not happened and it's okay. It's important to have skilled people staying on top of the situations, because you might have the tools, you know, but a fool with a tool is still a fool. You know, you still end up with the same situation. So it's important to always be aware and keep up, you know, up to speed. And I think that's one thing that, you know, raising that awareness within all organizations is, you know, getting there. And there are many other areas, because it's almost like the same concept of, you know, supply chain issues. You know, it's a third party, fourth party, fifth party. That has become a big factor now, because every vendor now is using another cloud, and you've got to make sure everything is coordinated and so on and so forth. So companies, you know, like ourselves and others too, you know, are bringing in those controls and, you know, staying on top of those controls. You might have those controls to give you those reports, but if you just glance through it, it's really not doing anything unless it's, you know, you're acting upon it and so on and so forth. Okay.
So last question again, staying with you, Les. So there's clearly, you mentioned the understanding of those controls and contracts and making sure that you're on top of it. If I'm an SMB, I've got hit, I've had to close my restaurant, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to hire back temporary workers with the reopening and so forth. The last thing on my mind is understanding and worrying about what the cloud is, even if it's maybe PI information I'm collecting. If I'm, I don't know, I've heard of remote chiropractic too. I don't know how that works, but regardless, if there's data collection of my patients that's now in the cloud, what recommendations do you have in terms of what have you seen work effectively for SMBs who now still have to deal with critical information, but they neither have the expertise nor do they have the budget even sometimes to.
So I think what's happening more and more is you're getting services through the toolings itself. You could use Netscope, or you could use any other tools. Okay, and I'm not just saying Netscope, but there are many other tools as well. It's important. You cannot say potentially that, hey, it doesn't matter to me, because you're liable. And certain you know, concepts, a good hygiene concept whether it's security or privacy or whatever, has to be maintained. Now, you might delegate that elsewhere, and again, make sure that you're covered for all that, so that you don't get, into trouble. So what's happening is there are companies that are providing services that will do just that. But it comes to that same concept of, you're still accountable because it's your stuff, right? If you're collecting it, you are accountable for it. You might delegate the responsibility of doing things, but you have to stay on top of it. I don't know that it's just like in your house. You want to protect your house, you can say, hey, I'll put a guard. But at the end of the day, it's those little things that you.
So same question, final question to you, Krishna. I mean, what have you seen in terms of success with SMBs who've been able to not just do it once, but keep up with it also?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Les said. I'm seeing more and more of the SMBs as they have to start complying with some of these regulations. I know Europe was ahead there, but then in the US, you have CCPA and other things which affect every common day businesses, like what you said, right? They are looking to some form of managed service providers. And again, I think even with the managed service providers, we are finding that they want to operate all of this in the cloud. Again, the old days of racking and stacking appliances is gone, but these managed service providers are now scrambling to provide these added services from compliance point of view, like what kind of solutions they need to have that will pass audits, right? Obviously, at some point, there'll be some audits and things like that. So that's what we are observing, that there is definitely a pull from the managed service providers to provide cloud security to cater to SMB markets.
Got it.
And can I add
Absolutely.
to that? So what happens is you have these managed service providers that will leverage different other providers. Like I use Netscope. It could be any other endpoint. There might be some other. Mm-hmm. And so they consolidate that and say, oh, we'll provide these kind of services to you and give you a consolidated dashboard. Because auditing is one, right? But you have to manage the threats as well, which are continuously happening and so on and so forth. But that managed service providers, market is also growing. Because today you can rent a hacker too. So you can do almost anything with the cloud, right? So anyway, thanks.
Yeah. No, great conversation. Again, thanks for your time, Les. Thanks for your time, Krishna.
Yep. You're welcome. Thanks,
Thank you.
Ashwin.